Now we would like to start the last session. Session 3 is consumer education session to promote interaction between universities in Tokushima Prefecture and ASEAN countries. The discussion will be held based on this theme. The coordinator is Mr. Takao Nishimura, Emeritus Professor of Yokohama National University. And today, panelists, Ms. Izumi Kado, Professor of Junior College, Shikoku University. Ms. Izumi Kado, Professor of Junior College. Ms. Yuka Sakamoto, Associate Professor of Naruto University of Education. Mr. Anthony Os, Kara-Iskos, Associate Professor of Graduate School of Law, Kyoto University, and Ms. Rizal Rahman, Associate Professor of National University of Malaysia, and Wirot Wompom Assistant Professor of Chuan Long University. So I will hand over to you, Mr. Nishimura. So now I'd like to start session 3. I'm Nishimura, the coordinator for the session 3. 2 years ago, G20 International Conference for Consumer Policy was held, and I participated in that, and it became a big theme. So today's topic is the change in consumer society and in the age of and consumer education in the age of digitalization. So we are inviting panelists from Thailand and Malaysia, and in Japan from Shikoku University, Naruto University, University of Education, and also Kyoto University. And the digitalization is progressing significantly, and in the COVID-19 crisis, we are restricted to go out and more than before. So as was reported earlier, the online e-commerce has been increasing, and this is becoming our daily norm. And we can enjoy convenience, but our situation, there something we have to worry about. So the other day, NTT Docomo communication issue occurred, and half a day smartphone couldn't be used. This kind of issue occurred in Japan, and this is very scary. So we rely, some of you fully rely on smartphones. So in this discussion, in domestic and internationally, what kind of issues we are facing, and we'd like to share our views. So let's start. I will divide this session into 3. Part 1, I would like each university to give the presentation. So what kind of education and research is ongoing at each university? And part 2, digitalization and what kind of mindset change among consumers. Part 3, and in digitalization society, what would be the challenge consumers are facing, and what kind of future we are envisioning? This kind of thing we'd like to discuss today. So first, let's start with Professor Kado. I'm Kado from Shikoku University. I'd like to talk about the human resource development for a digital society. So Shikoku University is located in the downstream side of Yoshino River, which is a major river, and about 3,000 students studying there. And by taking advantage of acquired knowledge, they can activate they can play active role. In order to nurture such student, we are providing education. The left one is our university, and the right one in 2020 in May, we were awarded Minister of State for the Special Missions Award. And we have three main pillars. Number one, we have consumer education program as a subject. So before they start working, they can learn citizenship before starting working, and providing such education is our mission. And one of them is regardless of the grader or faculty, anyone can take consumer civil society subject. And every year we provide this subject. And this year, 150 students took this course. And also, we have specialized elective subject, the Consumer Education 1, 2, Introduction to Human Life Science. And also, there is an opportunity to have discussion with the consumer issue experts. So we are always promoting the active learning so that students can have discussion actively. And number two, so once they acquire knowledge, they should output their knowledge. And this kind of opportunity is provided at the university. For example, our university students go to the shopping center and provide ethical teaching to primary school students and teach about the ethical level. And also the symposium about the sustainable fashion was held at our university. And the student who wrote the thesis on the clothes loss, and also students who are interested in fair trade opened a pop-up shop for fair trade. That kind of thing occurred out of the learning at the university. So this is our characteristic at the university. And number three, the consumer education, helpful for local communities. What I can do for communication, community. So by keeping this in mind, so think and act based on the outside in philosophy, that is actively promoted. On the left-hand side, this is the Japanese student and the international students engaged in cleanup activities to clean riverside area, and also ethical consumption promotion to revitalize shopping street, and also through recycling. Some students are helping developing countries. So consumer education program at our university, we students disseminate information in their own words and act on their own. That's all for me. Thank you very much. And next, Ms. Sakamoto, please. So I would like to talk about from the point of national the education point of view. So the plan to provide the devices, digital devices, that was accelerated and provided already. And in order to nurture mindset to work on the consumer issues, we are providing education. So what kind of impact consumers will receive? We have to think about that, and based on that, we need to provide education. So as educator, what we have to do from this point of view, we are working on that. So first is next, please, impact of digitalization on consumers.
There are some characteristics of digitalization. As you can see, the easy access to information and automation processing and judgment. You don't have to make decision yourself. And that's one of the characteristics for digitalization. And the 7, as it says here, psychological impacts of SNS and videos. So that would actually agitate the consumer confidence, and they force you to buy more. And these characteristics has to be well understood, and what kind of impacts do they have on consumers. So without giving a big thought, you just buy it, and you are vulnerable to not proper information. You were not aware of it, but you are somehow forced into buy something, and that would invade the consumer's rights at the same time. The right to be safe or right to be assured. In the world of anonymity, these are very vulnerable rights, and the right to be given a proper information is invaded, is violated, I think. And the right should be assured in the digitalized society, but there is a huge gap in between the theory and what's going on in an actual arena. Of course, the students are skillful in dealing with digitalized tools, but again, we have to think about what the digitalized society is all about, and we need to consider from scratch what should be taught to students. And for that purpose, I do the conduct discussion, and also I conduct mock classes. Thank you very much. Next, Professor Karaiskos. Thank you very much. I am Karaiskos from Kyoto University. And please take a look at the third slide. I am actually in the third. I'm going to talk about this issue from a general perspective. So the situation in universities. First, there's this legal framework. This the Act on Promotion of Consumer Education, and there's also the ethical ordinance is in place in Tokushima, and these are the strong merits for Japan. And if you look at the situation of students, and the digital literacy is very, very high compared with my generation at least. But however, they have digital literacy, but they are not fully aware of the risk of the caused by digitalization. They are not necessarily very high. For example, how the big data is treated, or how much power does the influencer have? Not many students have given us big thought about it. It depends on the college, but if they do have that kind of classes, this ordinance is like this, or the law is like this, or the precedents are like this. These are the most that they can reach, and they don't have time. They can't afford to delve in. Of course, there is an exception in universities, but generally speaking, the situation is like that. So, EU, if you look at the situation in EU, And there haven't been so much disparity between EU member states. So there is a harmonization of consumer law in EU, but in in Japan there is this. They don't have like consumer education. Like in Japan, we are actually face consumer education squarely, but that is something not done in EU. So of course, EU member states, each of them has fulfilling consumer education. But there are many exchange students to Kyoto University, but actually we don't have them because of the pandemic. But there are discussions, and I think they are very skilled in discussions. And how did they nurture that kind of ability? I think about it, and then I come to a conclusion that these abilities are cultured, fostered at schools or at home. I did an overseas survey in the past, and in case of Germany, it's school education. Do they use Facebook or SNS? Do they have to? Is it good? Is it better we have it, or is it better we don't have it? We don't have any like a one answer, and we have they have these students discuss that. In France, in history class, they don't memorize things, but there is this historical event, and there are four speakers expressing their different views for this incident, and how are you going to summarize their views? So this is not something to memorize, just memorization or rote memory. That's happening in EU. In case of Japan, in case of B2C, this is just my impression, my personal impression, but actually the default or the premise is that the students have a high trust on business operators. They don't do anything wrong, possibly, and then they will come up. They don't turn out to be betrayed. And especially the case in Europe, business operators, they don't believe. People don't believe in business operators in the starting point in Europe. Of course, there is a difference in social structure between Europe and Japan, but there may be the cause this might be caused by the education system between Japan and EU. Thank you very much. Now, Dr. Rizal, Professor Rizal, please.
Thank you, Ms. Chairperson. I'm going to brief the audience on the position of the National University of Malaysia on consumer education at the university level. But first and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of the conference for inviting me to this prestigious forum. So I hope that my session will be beneficial to all the audience and also to all my colleagues from Japan and also from Thailand, right? Right, now, my name is Associate Professor Dr. Rizal Rahman. I'm the chairperson of the Malaysian and Comparative Law Center, right? I'm from the Faculty of Law, University Kebangsaan Malaysia. All right. Now, from the perspective of consumer education at university level, at the moment, UKM and also the Federation of Malaysian Consumers Association, that is FOMCA, we have a memorandum of understanding with FOMCA since the year 2016, where for the purpose of the understanding, there are several key issues that we have actually agreed with FOMCA, where we agree to increase cooperation between UKM and FOMCA in conducting research, education, consultation, publications, and also development of human capital in consumerism. At the same time, we also seek to contribute to the mission of promoting awareness of consumers' rights, thus indirectly promoting and reinforcing the level of consumer protection in Malaysia. And lastly, UKM and also FOMCA, we agree to uplift the importance of community in the legal field, water, energy, product safety, handling of complaints, research, and education. So these are the three issues that we have agreed to work together with FOMCA for the purpose of the Memorandum of Understanding since the year 2016 up until now. All right. Now, that will be for the purpose of the user level, from the management level to the staff and also for the students. Right? And then for the purpose of the study on consumerism, okay, I would like to share what is currently happening at the Faculty of Law, UKM. So at the moment, the Faculty of Law actually offers 3 courses for the students. So these 3 courses are related to contract and also consumer law. So there are 3 courses altogether. So the first 2 courses, the law of contract and the law of contract number 2, these 2 courses are compulsory for the first year students at the Faculty of Law UKM, where they will be exposed to the nature, to the legal nature on how agreement can be enforced as a contract. Right? Okay? So by studying this course, then they'll be able to know what the elements that they need to fulfill in order for the agreement to be enforced as a contract. This is actually very important for the students to understand. Why? Because without any agreement that can be enforced as a contract, then how would a person be able to claim for his rights whenever his rights is being violated by the other person? Especially if you happen to be a consumer, then of course you need to know whether the agreement that you have entered into with the trader or the supplier can be enforced as a contract or not. Because if the agreement cannot be enforced as a contract, that means that you as a consumer, then you will not have any legal avenue for to address your problem. So that will be quite a problem for those who have entered into a void agreement with the supplier. Right. Now, and then another course that is also being offered at the Faculty of Law at the moment is the course on consumer law, UUK 4613, consumer law. This course is not compulsory, but only elective. But then, of course, for students who have already taken the courses on the law of contract, then they would be more interested to undertake this course as well, consumer law, because it's actually very relevant to the law of contract as well. So under consumer law, the students are exposed to the issues surrounding the transaction between the student, between the consumer and also the supplier or the trader, and then the students are exposed to the legal provisions that we have in Malaysia at the moment. At the moment, we have the Consumer Protection Act and the Consumer Protection Regulation, electronic trade transaction, and at the same time, they are also exposed to cases on consumerism, so that they will be able to understand what is actually happening out there. And then from this course as well, they are also exposed to the scenario in other countries for the purpose of comparison. Now, okay, in addition to the Faculty of Law UKM, there are several other faculties that also offer courses on consumerism for the purpose of raising consumer awareness among the students. For example, there are 2 faculties, the Faculty of Social Science and Humanities and also the UKM Graduate School of Business. So there are 3 courses altogether. The first one is the course on culture and consumerism. Second one, the course on consumer behavior. And the last one, consumer behavior theory and research. And then what is actually quite interesting about all these courses, not only these courses can be taken by students of UKM, but then these courses are also open to students from other universities all over the world, right? Okay, meaning that students from other universities, from Japan, from Thailand, from Indonesia, from Singapore, from US, from UK, or any other countries in the world, they can register for these courses as well via our International Relations Center, okay, which is probably known as UKM Global. So UKM Global is actually a provider for this facility where overseas students, if they wish to take any courses on consumerism, for example, in UKM, they can also register for those courses via UKM Global, and then we will also be able to give them the transfer of credit for the purpose of finishing the subject in Malaysia. Right? Okay. Now, so at the moment, those are all the education that we have prepared for the students in UKM. So basically, there are 2 things. The first one would be from the level of UKM, we have MOU with FOMCA, and second one, from the level of the students, we have offered several courses so that students will be able to experience and also understand the nature of consumer law and the nature of consumerism that is happening in Malaysia and also throughout the world. Thank you. That's all from me for the first session.
はい、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. The next one is the Chulalongkorn University, Dr. Willard. Would you please start? Thank you.
Are you ready to start, Dr. Willard? I think you're on mute.
Can you see? OK。日本語で発表させて。
I'll use Japanese for the presentation. This is from the Chulalongkorn University. I heard it, and it's only that within 5 minutes, so I try to accelerate my speed. So in the Thailand, in the university level, as you can see here, this is this is a campaign for the SDG that they conducted in the university. So we put so much strength on this SDG. Can you see that on the right side, you can find the reports starting from the 2014. So not only the faculty of law, each of the faculty are doing the activities for SDG. So you can refer to that, a website of the Chulalongkorn University if you want to find out the details. I'm from the faculty of law. So if you feel, hear from the faculty of law, that sounds quite, very cold and stern. But what I am in charge is that the consumer's law and the marketing. And when I do that, the designing of this, the lectures, how I can confer this to the students. So as you know, SDG number 12, that the responsibility for the production and consumption, right? So we have that the producer's responsibility, but nowadays we have consumers' responsibility as well. So in the faculty, so we have that the new subject, the consumer's law. So not only that in responsible production we focus on. So when it comes to that, consumer protection law, you can see that, the red part. When it comes to the concept of the protection, we use here. But let's start from the blue part. It is a consumer. So of course we are at the faculty of law. First, we will start at the educate the concept, and then the next important thing is a consumer's right. And that is the quite abstract concept. And then you can move on to the right side. And this way that we will cascade down into the practical parts. And then you can find the blue part. That is, season under the season's law or the freedom of contract. Is a little bit amended to the control of contract. So, which means that the government's intervention is quite happening into in the Thailand, and we also do that the case studies. We have various complaints in Thailand. We learned that not only Thailand but also that in overseas, and then they bring them to the consciousness. And that is the design of this the subject. Can you move on to the red part? And so here we have 4 P's at the very first bullet point: product, price, place, promotion. In this world of law, it is that these 4 are essential. So in the faculty level, undergrad level, that we see that, the overview of these 4 P's, especially price. In case of Thailand, supplies control law is still enacted. So we also teach that law to the students. So concept of 4 P's are taught in the consumer protection law subject. But when it comes to the marketing law, some of the students will become the business people. So as that business person, they also need to understand for people from the business perspective, and then the problem. So we do have that some issues and problems occur in a real society, right? Based on that, and then we do the group discussion, and then we do the presentation. So here, as you can see in the center, it is quite practical. After graduate from our faculty of law, they can apply the knowledge to the real world. The last one is the law on the right side. You can find the link, not only that the field of law, but also the other academic field. So these connections are required. So those students who need that kind of stuff, not only that they know law subject, but also the other subject, and they will learn. And then the limitation of law under the current enacted laws, we still have some issues. So we teach them about that, and then they will understand not only the laws and also the reality. So here they will come up to the liability. Liability is like a responsibility. Students are the consumers, right? However, after graduation, they will become the business person. They need to understand that in a product liability as well. So therefore, that they also need to understand the liability. So consciousness, practical, liability, these three are the final goals.
Thank you very much. So, from Malaysia in the Toronto University, so representative the high-level university of each country, and we 2 weeks ago with the university of those panelists, the presentation by students, we had this kind of online exchange held 2 weeks ago. We are working on this kind of international collaboration. So at each university, the consumer law or consumer education, and what kind of education has been provided that was explained. I won't make the summary, but now let's move on to the next topic, progress in digitalization and changes in consumer awareness and behavior. You already touched upon some of them, but I'd like to ask you first with Ms. Kado. So from a personal point of view, I would like to talk about 2 points. I don't have material to show. One is consumer behavior. The information, how much we are dependent on information for making decisions. And when I talk to students and if I ask why you make such a decision, and the student would answer quite because I found this kind of information or that kind of information on internet. I often receive this kind of answer. So instantaneously, we can access any information these days, and we tend to believe without thinking. Some of the information are very useful and valuable. However, they are when we search information, we type in keyword, and at that time already the information is biased or limited. We have to be aware of that. So the digitalization is making progress. So what to believe and what to trust and what is the rationale behind that. And the literacy imbalance is occurring. And this is my point. And the second point is the change in consumer behavior. So this is the consumer, so not face-to-face consumption. This is very vulnerable. Of course we can enjoy convenience, but there is a risk as well. And how much we are understanding this, I think this is kind of risk. Digitalization, we can uh, uh, transact and immediately, and and digitalization is making progress significantly. However, once problem happens, the identifying problem and negotiating with seller will be very important. We cannot see, touch, and understand such kind of situation is the matter of course these days, and the information is spreading. This kind of sense of crisis, we are losing this kind of sense of crisis in the age of digitalization, and this is the dark side of the digitalization, I believe. So the information we are relying on is changing, and how we rely on information is changing, and the information itself is changing. And this is my second point. Thank you very much. So, Tenohira consumption means that you mean handheld consumption. Yeah, right. So, I would like to introduce some data which can be the back data for what Professor Kado said. This is the data provided by CAA, and this was a project we worked on, and so 20 to 70s in Japan were targeted, and this is the result of the web survey. So the experience of troubles associated with purchasing products that ran out of stock due to COVID-19. So the function and the quality were worse than I expected. The explanation, indication, and the actual contents were considerably different, and so on. And some of them are some people couldn't receive the delivery, but this kind of trouble was limited. However, the quality or label or the number of ratio of the complaint higher. But this one was, if this one was for the vaccine or something, and then it would be a big trouble. Next slide, please. And trouble experience. And this was quantified and calculated, and we made an analysis by connecting to panic buying. So the green one, some people went to several stores to get it by any means. If they frequently do, they tend to encounter more troubles. But if you do the same thing, the ratio of encountering trouble goes up significantly. That is shown in blue. So if you purchase without thinking very much, and then the a possibility you encounter trouble goes up, and also you have to do transaction immediately. That means that you will lose the thoughtful mind before making the decision. So the psychological impact will be there. That's what you meant, yeah. And myself, so from general point of view, so that I can hand over to also the Malaysia and Thailand. And so there are 4 points. Professor Kado already touched upon this issue in detail. So I sometimes but I sometimes say that the Google teacher joke as a joke, but it's not a joke. Sometimes just simply just without making research, we just simply use it. So and anonymity is there. So the information is there, but who wrote and what kind of based on what kind of information is not clear. But if we utilize this kind of information on our thesis, sometimes we get criticism. So it is very difficult. So so it is a very difficult era. So they collect the information. That is my point. And online behavior. So because of online sharing information, it's very easy anytime. But the targeted advertisement. So based on what we are looking at, what we are seeing, that recommendation or like related advertisement pops up. So rating or the comparison reason, comparison site. So who is doing the research and who is providing this kind of information? So we can take actions. It is easy to do the online activities. However, actually, they made it more difficult. And smart devices, the version sometimes updated, and and what you are using is not compatible with this, and your support is already terminated, and the password needed to be changed. So this kind of thing happen, and actually it is smart, but it's not, and maybe increased inconvenience. That's what I feel. And number 4. This one I intentionally put one line, one blank line here, interpersonal distance. So from Thailand and Malaysia, they are joining online. And also in Europe or some other places, I can talk to them online anytime, very easily. However, I'm actually in the venue and I'm speaking to people in person. I feel very happy, and I had a very hard time to speak to my students through this PC. And and some students said that they are happy that they are now able to come back to the class, actual physical class. So sometimes the criticism or can be done because of online. So it's closer, but actually distance is there.
Now we'd like to ask Professor Raman regarding the consumers' behavior change in the progress of digitalization. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chairperson. All right. Regarding the progress of digitalization and also the changes in consumer behavior and also awareness, I'd like to highlight the contribution that is actually being made by several bodies that we have in UCAM. From the students level, there are actually 2 bodies. The first one is the Gerakan Pengguna Siswa, or the Graded Consumer Movement. All right. So this movement is actually working under the purview of the Ministry of Higher Education, where every single public higher learning institution should have a student club dedicated to consumerism. And GPS UKM advocates consumer awareness and rights among students, UKM community, local and national community. So when it comes to digitalization and changes to consumer behavior and also awareness, right? GPS UKM actually works in promoting what they call the student consumers in UKM as to how they would able to respond to the current development that we have in Malaysia, especially ever since the COVID-19 pandemic last year. There are so many digital immigrants, meaning that people who had not actually what they call been inclined to use internet before, but then due to the what they call COVID-19 pandemic, then they were what they call forced to switch to mobile gadgets for the purpose of for the purpose of moving on with their life in the pandemic. So these are actually the people that are quite vulnerable when it comes to what they call digitalization, also consumer behavior, because they use to enter into transactions face to face. But then due to the pandemic, then they had to move on to what they call digitalization, to digital transactions, and also there will be changes to their consumer behavior as well, because as we know, the interaction online, also the interaction that we have face to face, are totally different thing. Where when we engage in face-to-face transaction, then we'll be able to monitor the situation and or they could communicate directly with the person. But then when it comes to digital transaction, that is quite difficult for us to fathom, to understand as to whether we're talking to the right person or not. And then, of course, for people who are not so used to technology, then they might be manipulated by scammers or by those who seek to take advantage of technology upon these people. Right. Now, the second group that we have in Malaysia is Perundang UKM, the UKM Law Students Association. Right. For GPS UKM that I mentioned to you just now, GPS UKM is more on promoting awareness from the social perspective, right? Okay? While Perundang is actually promoting awareness from the legal perspective, right? Because whenever we move on from whenever we elevate ourselves from our current status to a digital status. Okay, for example, like in Malaysia, for example, we're moving towards digital Malaysia or digital economy, so that at the end of the day, we will be able to make use of Industrial Revolution 4, the IR4, so that we'll be able at the end of the day to reach the status of society 5.0, society who are not only conversant with technology but are also aware of the need of the consumer needs as well. So meaning that while being developed as a digital society, we should also be aware of the current situation that we have. For example, if we are using technology, then the technology should be green technology, right? If we are using what they call some machineries, for example, then we have to ensure that the toxic emission from this machinery will not be to a certain level that will be dangerous to human beings. So while being developed, while being digitized, okay, we should also be aware of what we should be doing. So Perundang UKM is actually assisting what they call not only UKM but also the society at large in promoting awareness from the legal perspective, right? Okay, so that the customer will be able to understand what are their rights, what are the rights that they have when it comes to they call consumerism, right? And then, okay, these are some of the activities that have been what they call conducted by Perundang and also by GPS UKM, right? Now, I want to share with you another center that's also quite what they call upfront in promoting awareness. Okay, as far as what they call digital consumers are concerned, the Center of Malaysian Comparative Law Center, right? This center is actually working in collaboration with so many institutions out there in order to promote not only consumer awareness but also some other issues in relation to society behaviors and also legal interactions, right? Right. And the last one is the Malaysian Journal of Law and Society. Right. This journal, okay, promotes not only the legal aspect but also the social legal aspect of people. And then one of the aspects that had been highlighted throughout this journal would be on consumerism. Right. Now, ever since the pandemic, what happened is that because we have so many digital migrants out there, UCAM, we have actually started with what they call webinars in order to educate the public on how to handle the pandemic from the digital point of view. Because as we know, because we are not sure how long are we going to be under this pandemic. So more or less we are moving ahead towards digitalization. But then when we move from the current status to full digital status, then of course there will be major changes to consumer behavior and consumer activities, right? And we do hope that every single consumers out there will be able to adapt to these changes and will be able to move on with their life and also will be able to benefit from any progress that is happening currently out there. Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
はい、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Now, and we wrote what in Pom Sensei onegai. Thank you. So these are the change in consumer behavior. And it's not only about universities, but from the perspective of the entire society, there are three perspectives we can touch upon. I said here online. Offline is included actually. In Thailand, if you go to countryside, there are many civil population, and we don't really know that there is a concept of self-help or like self-production. But in online, digitalized society is youth. In Thailand, people have a concept that digitalized society belongs to youth, so that the silver population is left behind. That's the concept in Thailand. Online is youth. That's the mindset. That's a challenge at the same time. So the government is trying to how to accommodate the silver population into the digital society, and that has to be prepared for that. Digital, up until now, there's this law of jungle. The bigger one, stronger will survive. But the earlier, the better. If there is a big possibility for small SMEs to win, regardless of size, if they go to the site at early. There are 4 platform, leaders, stores, and consumers. These are the characters. There are issues. And going forward in Thailand, there would be enacted. This will be necessary for the government to come up with the laws for these 4 characters. And the second one, observation. And there are many online fraud cases. There has been any complaints. And in the recently, there is like news of fraudulent business practices. And because of the online fraud, students or young people, those people who can have an access to internet, has to be in a position to study or learn to have a knowledge about the consumer education on SNS, and that's possible. And the third is opportunity. Consumers can easily become operators, business operators. It's because of the pandemic. For example, consumers become business operators, or the students. Actually, they have an online classes, and they are students, they are consumers, and they can be business operators at the same time. And that's often the case. That's increasing in numbers. So going forward, in terms of consumer behavior change, there is a disparity. There's a less disparity between the business operators and consumers. And lastly, I'd like to touch upon SDGs. SDGs is not a familiar concept for Thailand people yet, because we are just focusing on pandemic. So going forward, entire population will get to know the SDGs, the word called SDGs. And that's the situation of Thailand. Thank you very much. That's all for me. I was listening to your talk, and you talked about the food delivery service. But in Japan, we are actually the food delivery service is increasing in Japan as well. And if there's a trouble with the food delivery service, who's going to take responsibility? And that's a huge issue that are facing us. Up until now, in digitalization, the future outlook or the color challenges facing consumers going forward. This is the third theme we'd like to take up. And in your remarks, all of the speakers, the anonymity, there's an issue of anonymity, and at the same time, with the digitalization, people who are not used to it, who are vulnerable to digitalization. And there is a necessity to enhance their understanding or enlighten them. And the digital literacy may not be high, but at the same time, on the other hand, young people may have digital literacy, but they are not fully aware of the risk that is brought by digitalization. Consumers and the gap between consumers and the business operators, we thought that there is a huge divide between the two, but now the digitalization is like you can use handheld device to not only purchase but to sell.
So in the very beginning, Nakano-sensei talked about the digital platform. So using the digital platform, we can sell the goods very easily. So what is the problem doing that? So that kind of issue to raise as well. Under the circumstance. So based on that, today's discussion, so future outlook for the digital society in terms of the consumers, and also that, given that the restriction on the consumers in the digital society, and from that point of view, I would like to get in some opinions from each of the professors. First, Professor Kado. Thank you. So in order to, living in the digital society, how we can provide, the training to the consumers. There are 3 points. And the first one is the promotion of digital education, which means providing learning opportunities. So we have a video available. Let's show that.
福島県では SDGs を学ぶ消費者教育のデジタル教材 Our エシカルタウンで SDGs を学ぼうを作成しました。この教材では持続可能な社会につながるエシカル消費や消費者志向経営の取り組みから SDGs を学ぶことができます。また、6つに分けられたコンテンツを活用し、目的に合わせた自分流の学びが可能です。
はい、ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. At the end of the last year, we made this education material. So we had the research association inside of Shikoku University, and we supervised that. And in order to do that, the digital consumer education, first and foremost, we need to have that in education materials, and also that the digital environment need to be developed in that educational field. And the second, necessity of the experiment in consumer education in digital societies. So it has to be on hands. and also that conversation with those people in the community, and how we can leverage that those community people. So it should not be virtual, hands-on and in-person communication. Because this is the digital society, that kind of real experience is that a big keyword for this education. Third, so information disparity in the digital society. We should not leave anybody behind, right? We shouldn't have any digital vulnerable people. That's something we need to solve in the community. So digital vulnerable will become the information vulnerable, health vulnerable. So that kind of, or the vulnerability will produce the disparities, and we need to fulfill that disparity. Thank you very much. Next one, Sakamoto Sensei, Professor Sakamoto, please. So let me talk about the issues in terms of the digital society. As the Professor Cardo mentioned, digital education materials are required. So CAA developed that in some digital education materials for the consumption in the digital society. So the education material, which can be utilized in the educational field, so there various things are then ongoing, right? So you can see that on the left side, like psychological impact and incitement and so on. And sometimes that the consumers could not understand what is the system. So in the end, the consumers without considering or judging and to make that shopping. So that is something we need to address. They need to do that careful analysis, thinking, and also that they're making the determination for that shopping. So especially for the digital shopping. So our students need to understand the system. So, for example, the targeting advertisement. So I saw something, and then some related advertisement popping up to my screen all the time. Why, right? And the short mail was popping up all the time. Why they understand my number? If the students do not understand the system, they just wonder, right? However, if they understand the system, that's why those advertisements popping up. So they also need to understand how to utilize the digital devices. Those kind of education is required. Thank you very much. Next, Professor Karaikos, please. Thank you. Sure. From my side, the future look for the digital society in terms of the consumers. So I get some points from the legal system as well as the consumer education. There are the three bullet points for the legal system. First and foremost, we need to ensure the transparency. So audience, if you look at page 1 of our slides, 2020, and then there's some typo on that slide 1. So that the information is scattered, right? And then the consumer needs to find out some important information. That's very difficult. So that's why that legally in the legal system need to show that what is the important information. For example, that assets purchasing, assets the selling, so that the important information are indicated. So in the same way, so for example, like when the business operators are doing that advertisement, they pick up that something good, and then they try to advertise that part. But at the same time, they need to pick up that what is bad and also share that information, and that will protect the consumers, right? That is the transparency. If they can secure the transparency, that the consumers can make that comparison, what's good and what's bad. And second, the bullet point, that is the need for the smart legislation with appropriate comprehensiveness. And so if this one is applicable only for screen, however, that if we use the voice like Alexa, that is not applicable. And in the future, there is another way to do that, place the order. Again, that this is not applicable. That is not smart when it comes to the law. For example, in that the law EU, they have that in unfair some directive to prevent from that any unfair trade. So that is one of the models we can utilize in Japan. The last one is that the digitization as a tool to realize a sustainable society. So one of them is like a sharing economy. So for example, the share the car, and then for that, an online platform is very useful. So the law need to regulate that from that point of view. And so there are 2 points from that consumer education point of view. Of course, the first one is the digital skills. So we need to increase the digital literacy. However, it's not just how to use, right? Not only that the paste the link and so on, but also that the fundamental system they need to understand what is the AI, how it is functioned, and they need to understand, and also they need to get a chance to think in that philosophical manner. And so that chance need to be provided in that education. So it doesn't matter whether they made it wrong and so on. They need to have a discussion with the in the educational field. And the last one is about the development of the balance in the digitization. Professor Kado mentioned about the convenience and risk and the convenience and humanity. So, for example, that the digitization and digital tool is very dangerous. I'm not going to use it. So it's not like a black and white. Well, it might be dangerous, but at the same time that it is convenient. So considering that risk, maybe we can accept a certain risk, and we can leverage that tool to a certain extent. So we should not make that as anything black and white. So also that we need to live in at the very gray line. Thank you. So the start, we have that starting. We are late to start. So next one is that Malaysia, please.
Thank you, Ms. Chairperson, for for the last session. Okay, I'm quite quite. I would like to bring up the matter raised by Professor Carrascos just now on the jurisdiction issue, because jurisdiction is also one of the main problem when it comes to consumerism. Because let's say, for example, I happen to be a consumer in Malaysia, right, purchasing an item from a seller in China, for example. Then, if the item is delivered to me and then the item is defective, so what will be my result? So that's actually quite a problem to me, because at the moment, one of the recent issues of concern on online sale of goods and services that we have in Malaysia is that it is actually not possible for Malaysian to file a consumer claim against a seller outside of Malaysia, because the consumer tribunal is only applicable what they call to buyers and also suppliers residing in Malaysia. So it's not actually possible for me in Malaysia to bring a consumer claim application against a seller in China or a seller in Japan or in Hong Kong, or even in Thailand or even in Singapore. Right, so that's actually quite difficult for us, because the nature of our consumer claim tribunal, it is not actually extraterritorial. So that becomes quite a problem to us in Malaysia, right? And then we need to have what they call a new set of regulation, of course, when it comes to jurisdiction, because at the moment the choice of jurisdiction is mostly stated in the contract provided by the seller. Let's say, for example, I'm purchasing an item from a seller in Germany. Then, of course, the agreement that I have to enter with the seller in Germany would state that in the case of any conflict, what they call in relation to the sale of goods or services, then the law to be applied would be the law of Germany. So that, of course, will not be beneficial for me being a consumer in Malaysia if the outcome of the transaction is not what they call advantageous to me. All right. Okay. However, there are some mechanisms that are currently being developed by marketplace owners, for example, like Lazada, Shopee, and then we also have China Warehouse, for example, Carousel, Mudah.my. So many online platforms out there. All these online platforms, they have one thing in common, that they have what they call the ODR, or the online dispute resolution mechanism. Right. Okay. So meaning that if I purchase something from a seller outside from Malaysia, then whenever there's any problem with the transaction, then I can resort to the mechanism. However, one thing that we need to also consider is that some buyers, they prefer to purchase from individual sellers, all right, not through the platform. That becomes quite problematic. That's why we need to have a very dedicated law to handle this matter. And another thing of concern is in relation to personal data protection. Because whenever we, as consumers, we transact online, then we'll be surrendering our data to the platform, to the seller, right? And then there is no guarantee that our data will not be manipulated by the other party. So without any solid legislation on the matter, then it will become quite problematic. As far as Malaysia is concerned, we have one law called the Personal Data Protection Act. So this law caters to data user and also data subject. So data subject would be us being the consumer, and data user would be those suppliers or those business entities who use our data for the purpose of giving us their services. At the same time, also it is also very important for us to note that the personal data protection notice provided by the service providers tend to be quite formalized in nature only, meaning that it's just for the purpose of formality. But then in reality, there are so many cases where our data have been manipulated, right? So in order to solve this problem, of course, the first thing that we need to do is that we need to have a new set of law for the purpose of either by introducing new law or by amending the current legislation. That one would be by way of legislative or government intervention, right? At the same time, from the perspective of university, for example, it's also possible for students exchange. So students from Malaysia, so for other countries, we can work this one out so that our students will be exposed to many issues in relation to consumerism. And then, of course, we in UK, we also look forward to seminars, joint research, joint publication, and if possible, letter of intent, MOA, or even MOU in the future, in order for us to be able to assist one another in developing consumer awareness so that we'll be able to protect one another, okay, in this challenging world. Thank you. That's all from me from Malaysia.
はい、ありがとうございました。おせおせですいません。
Thank you very much. Professor Wirot.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Lastly, in the future, the 3 points. First one is law and regulation reform, and COVID-19. The current law, I think there is a limitation, especially cooling off. We have only 2 laws in place. So EU type or Japanese type, we need to look at them, and we need to do research how we can make it effective as a law. We have to consider that. And the second point is we are living in a complex digital world. Clear explanation need to be required. The clear information and the complicated society, how to maintain these two, how to make the balance. And also consumer and businesses, how to maintain balance. This is difficult. So if the burden is put much on businesses, and then it will lead to the burden on consumers as well. And SDGs the Thailand, as a nation, we can mandate this. So by aiming at the SDGs, so if we mandate that in Thailand, this is a Thai-specific model. If we do that, we may be able to achieve the target by 2030. And lastly, awareness of consumer rights. The consumer rights. So something which make consumer understand consumer rights easily, that kind of efforts need to be taken. So fake news, how they can tell that is fake news or not, this kind of information should be provided. And also personal information, data protection. We also have facing issue in Malaysia as well. So based on these, so that's my view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for inspired review. It was a very, very short time, but we have a very deep discussion. Thank you to all the distinguished speakers. So I think the digitalization will accelerate going forward, and it is convenience and is out there, but we shouldn't be just drowning in the sea of convenience. If we do the shopping online, and then our data, personal data, will be surrendered, will be go out there, and all the information will be accumulated, and then it will transform into a big data, and then they will give us the recommendations based on that data. And it may be maybe you may realize that it's kind of like very like troublesome, but Amazon is actually saying to the consumers that they use the information that they get in the first place. So that's what we have to be aware. And for the law development, for the consumer policy, that has to be in place. And the operators and consumers have to have a win-win relationship. And that's kind of system should be in place. And from the perspective of consumer education, youth, young people, and elderly people, and we have to regain the sovereignty as a consumer. That's what we have to regain again. And so that we need to be consumers that has to actually ask for assert our rights for that. Thank you very much for the wonderful speakers and all these online speakers and those people distinguished speakers we have here. Thank you very much. Mr. Nishimura, the panelist people, thank you very much. And the current situation regarding the consumer education has been explained in a very easy to understand manner. And I hope that the college students will have a higher understanding or awareness of consumer education. Thank you very much, and everyone, please give a big hand to the wonderful speakers. Thank you so much.